Assalamu alaikum students. I am Mohammad Ikram Sarfraz and I belong to Pakistan Audits and Account Service. Today I am formally beginning a philosophy session, and the purpose of this session is to just aid students of philosophy in their conceptual clarity, and I have taken notes of few things from different sources. The sources that I consulted are History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell and few Pakistani authors who have degrees in philosophy, their PhD degrees in philosophy, and some other Western scholars. So, first of all, whenever we start a topic, whenever we start a social science, the fundamental question that arises is nature and scope of that subject. And when it comes to philosophy, certainly this is the oldest academic discipline in the world, because before the proper classification of various subjects, there was no elaborate distinction between various academic disciplines. So whoever was in search of knowledge, or a better word, in search of wisdom, was called philosopher. So, first, a few points just for understanding what philosophy actually is. Whenever you study philosophy, when we are going to deal with its nature or its scope, so we are primarily, we are trying to understand how philosophy is different from other subjects, or what are fundamental things, what are primary things that we study in philosophy. So, subject matter of philosophy or area of philosophy. First, a few common things that everyone is and can be a philosopher, because everyone has a few questions in their mind, and all of us in varying capacities are in search of knowledge. So everyone is or can be a philosopher. Then, how a philosopher is different from other persons. And this is something very particular to this subject, very peculiar to this subject. It cannot be found in in its true spirit than in other subjects. It is only a characteristic of philosophy that it is annoyingly inquisitive. You go on questioning things, you go on asking things, you go on explore inner meanings of different concepts, whether it is knowledge, whether it is way of arguing, whether it is about explaining nature of something, whether it is about what is God, what is mind, what is soul, what is consciousness, what is the purpose of life, what is truth, what is knowledge, what is beauty. So there is virtually no end of questioning. So this is what is very important about this subject, that this is annoyingly inquisitive, a philosopher, or in this subject. Then one thing more, if you are a philosopher, five things would certainly affect your philosophy. It is impossible that these in philosophy of every philosopher, it is impossible that you do not find impact of these five things. Five major elements influence thinking of a philosopher. What are those five things? Age. Every philosopher's philosophy is product of that age. Whether it is Plato, it is Aristotle, it is Machiavelli, it is Rousseau, Locke, Hobbes, Marx, you would find important questions of that time tried to be addressed in the philosophy of that philosopher. Now, I do not want to go into details. For example, talk about Machiavelli. Apparently, you will see that this was a ruthless person who was in favor of ruthless use of force. But look at the Italy of that time. Italy was divided into a number of states that were warring with each other, and this was a requirement of that time, that only ruthless force was the solution for the political problems of that era. So every other philosopher, for example, talk about Marx. So labor, extreme inequality, subjugation of the labor classes, extreme capitalism, these were the problems of that age. So every philosopher's philosophy is product of his age. Then culture. You would hardly find any philosopher going against his culture. If a philosopher is going against his culture, it still tells us something about that culture. So, that culture, whether it is love of that culture or hatred of that culture, that is part and parcel of philosophy of a philosopher. For example, if you talk about Plato or Aristotle, the fundamental questions of that time were state, nature of state, and relation of individual with state. So you would find these themes almost universally covered in the philosophy of all the philosophers of that time. Then perspective. So this is something very important. There is a philosopher who believes that truth is hidden from eyes. That what is true, what is actual knowledge, what is reality is hidden from the human eye. That our mind is at least unable to easily find that reality. So, school of thought and ambition of philosopher, these are other things that impact or influence the philosophy of a philosopher. So, school of thought, whether someone is idealist or realist or empiricist or existentialist or postmodernist or a utilitarian, so this that is a rigid mold in which a philosopher finds him or herself. So these are other important things that actually influence the philosophy of a philosopher. For example, if you are an empiricist, so you would believe only in those things and in those sources of knowledge which can be experienced, which your sensory organs can experience beyond the physical world that can be experienced. You won't be thinking about anything. So that's how there would be great differences and sometimes irreconcilable controversies between different philosophers. So, the perspective or school of thought, this is another important factor influencing philosophy. Then, ambition of philosopher, that is the goal of a philosopher, that what a philosopher actually wants to achieve. Few philosophers are very dedicated, very keen, extremely ambitious about whatever they are exploring. So if you would find a taint of madness in a philosopher, so that would again influence the thoughts of a philosopher. Then one other thing, as I mentioned, this lecture series is about conceptual clarity of things. So I would be discussing these questions in a proper structure, in proper headings in which you can reproduce in your exams. But first I want to explore some of the concepts related to this discipline. There is one very famous line in philosophy, that philosophy tries to explore things in their totality. Now, that is very important for you to understand that philosophy views things as a whole. Man, man is most of the people, most of the observers would see any living things as a physical reality. Then there would be others who would see an entity or a living thing as a spiritual reality. That beyond this physical world, there are other things. There is mind, there is soul, there are thoughts. Then this human or living thing is part of some other thing. For example, we as humans are part of this universe. So this there is something bigger than us, then something is bigger than the other things, and this process is going on. So viewing things in their totality means that a philosopher views bigger picture. On the one hand, philosopher digs deep into inner realities of the things, and on the other hand, a philosopher tries to build connection of things with their surroundings, with their environment. So perceiving things as a whole means a philosopher wants to grab reality from all dimensions, from all perspectives. That it is a quest for complete, perfect, comprehensive understanding of the things. That I am not understanding one aspect or two aspects or three aspects of something. If I am a philosopher, I am, if this is my hand, I want to explore nature of my hand. So understanding my hand as separately exploring fingers or my palm or the flesh or the blood would not be enough for a philosopher. So this is a very pertinent example if you want to quote it. If I'm a philosopher, I would try to understand nature of my hand from all of its details. So that is how a philosopher wants to see things as a whole. Then philosophy, this is as I mentioned earlier, that philosophy is co-extensive with human culture and civilization. That philosophy was always there because it is quest for knowledge. So it is, this discipline is as old as humans. Now I would try to formally point out some of the headings that you need, some of the points that you can reproduce in your exam. Definition: philosophy as an academic discipline is an umbrella term that includes distinct but related investigations. Why I am saying this? Related investigations, but they are distinct as well, and there are multiple investigations. Whether I am a researcher of language, whether I am trying to understand that what is the logical way of talking, logical way of saying things, so logic, whether I am a researcher of things beyond this physical world, metaphysics, whether knowledge itself is subject of my inquiry. In that case, I am a researcher of epistemology, a philosopher in epistemology. So there are various distinct disciplines, but they are interrelated, and these are various investigations. So philosophy is umbrella term for all of these, because in all of these domains, a philosopher or a person is in search of wisdom. So if we define philosophy in the language of Plato, Plato says that philosophy is knowledge of eternal principles and of the nature of things. Philosophy begins with wonder. In the start of my lecture, I said that a philosopher is annoyingly inquisitive. So that is what Plato is pointing, that philosophy begins with wonder. As long as you do not think, as long as you do not study and try to explore the nature of things, you do not have questions in mind, You cannot be a philosopher. So philosophy begins with wonder. It talks about nature of things. So philosophy is always asking questions. I gave you a few examples such as what is beauty, what is good government, what is good citizen, what is God, what is mind, what is relation. So this what, why, how is a continuous element of life of a philosopher. So nature, what are things, how they are made, what is their composition, what is their functions. So this nature of things, this is a quest of philosophy. The knowledge of eternal principles. Our universe, our world is working on some principles that are not changing. So, for example, if we explore philosophy of pre-Socratic philosophers, they believed that everything is made of water. They believed that this world is in continuous flux or nothing is changing. So they were actually trying to explore some of the eternal principles over which they can build the explanation of all of this universe. That they believe that there are a few principles over which everything is working. So philosophy is based of those eternal principles. So you would be able to find other definitions. The philosophy is sum of two Greek words, philein to love and sophia knowledge or wisdom, which means philosophy is love of wisdom. Uh, then historically, philosophy is divided in three main eras: ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy, then modern and post-modern philosophy. So if you divide philosophy into different eras, then there are three eras: ancient philosophy, medieval philosophy, modern and postmodern philosophy. In ancient philosophy, then philosophy can further be divided into Indian, Chinese, Persians, Egyptian, and Greek philosophers. And important philosophers of that era are Chanakya, Sun Tzu, Thales, Heraclitus, Parmenides, Pythagoras, Protagoras, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Then among medieval philosophers, Muslim, Christian, and Jewish philosophers are important, and out of these, Al-Kindi, Farabi, Sina, Ghazali, Razi, Ibn Khaldun, and Ibn al-Arabi are major philosophers, and Machiavelli and Locke, Rousseau. Then modern and postmodern philosophy, sorry, Locke, Rousseau are placed in modern philosophers. So Machiavelli is placed in medieval philosophers. Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche, Bergson, Russell, John Dewey, Chomsky, for example. So important branches of these schools or important contributors of this modern and postmodern philosophy have resulted into rationalism, empiricism, idealism, pragmatism, existentialism, positivism, and logical positivism. Now, I'm going to talk about nature of philosophy. So, simply, what do you understand by nature? Nature of a subject. So, by nature, we means what are the essential characteristics of this subject? What are distinctions of this subject? Or how philosophy can be treated as a science or as an art? So, in nature, now you are actually talking about its fundamental characteristics. So philosophy is process of reflection and criticism. Reflection means deep thinking. If you want to be a philosopher, you cannot be a superficial thinker. You need to dig deep into realities. Then criticism, you need to problematize the existing perceptions or concepts. For a moment, if I want to be a philosopher, for me every concept is wrong and every theory is flawed, and I need to explore it in order to understand that whether there are some problems. So also if I am philosopher, an element of doubt is always in my mind and in my method. I will doubt everything. So this is a reflection and criticism. Looking at the world as a whole, I talked about that we try to explore things in their entirety. Logical analysis of language, this is very important. For philosophy, language is very important. This thing resulted into a separate branch of philosophy which we understand as logic. So if your language is not logical, you cannot be a philosopher. There are a number of things that we say in our daily lives which are logically incorrect, so philosophically they are incorrect. So language, then that what words we use, because epistemology is study of knowledge. So in this we explore meanings of different words. So there are philosophers who are too much focused on language, and for them metaphysics is virtually, which means religion and God and philosophies or concepts related these things are virtually meaningless because they cannot be experimentally proven. So language is important for philosophy. Then investigation of deepest problems of human existence. Actually, what do you believe that how philosophy actually came into being? This question must arise in your minds, that how philosophy came into being. Philosophy tries to explore, answer various questions of human existence. So I was saying that, have you ever wondered that how philosophy originated? I believe philosophy originated when humans started to think about what is life, why, how they were created, why they were created. So these are some of the most important questions of in the life of every human being, that they want to make out the sense of their lives in the bigger scheme of the things. They want to give a meaning and purpose to their lives, and they want to understand this ever going cycle of life and death. So this birth, this death, this concept of life hereafter, this concept of some bigger entity, that if whether there is someone powerful, someone creator of this very seemingly very vast universe. So these are some fundamental questions that come into mind of a person that gave birth to this discipline, that are subject matter of philosophy, that will be subject matter of philosophy, that will be start and end of philosophy for all times to come, as was the case in previous times. So philosophy is investigation of deepest problems of human existence. Then philosophy begins with wonder. I talked about that. This is very important. This wonder is this question in mind, this inquisitive spirit. If for you, if something, for example, Newton, we usually take example of the discovery of his concept of gravity. So virtually all of us see things falling, but why it was Newton who thought about that, what is the why things do fall towards the earth, why don't they go upwards? So this inquisitive spirit, this childlike wonder should be a fundamental characteristic of a philosopher. Philosophy begins with wonder, then repudiation of dogmatism. If you are not questioning the existing beliefs, you cannot reach truth. So that is why there is no place of dogmatism in philosophy. Then qualified criticism. This is in the nature of philosophy, that you are not criticizing things just to satisfy the ego of a philosopher, just to appear more qualified. So this was, by the way, one characteristic of sophists. But if you find authentic philosophers, they would always criticize in a manner that would aid other people to clarify their concepts of truth, of knowledge, of reality. So, this is a fundamental difference between a philosopher and a common person. That if philosopher is criticizing, his criticism would be qualified. His criticism would add to the knowledge of other people and his own knowledge. So, openness and tolerance in held beliefs. Openness is very important. As long as you are not having this belief in your mind that what I have gathered till now, what I have understood till now, it can be wrong, it can be revised, there can be other facets of this reality, other aspects of this reality. So this openness and tolerance, accepting others, the way of differentiating with others, the skill, the respect, the tolerance that a philosopher displays for others, and remains open that he can be wrong, that reality can be something different from my understanding of reality. This is a virtue of a philosopher and this subject. So this is in the nature. Openness and tolerance is in the nature of the subject of philosophy. Then it is a midway between religion and science. Actually, on the one hand, philosophy is trying to explore what cannot be experimented. On the one hand, philosophy is trying to explore what is purely in the power of observation of humans. And philosophy is not static between these two areas. Philosophy is not, there are many philosophers who believe that reality is not just limited to physical world. And there are philosophers who believed that reality, although is beyond this physical world, yet it has intrinsic linkage with the physical world. So philosophy is a bridge between physical world and spiritual world, between physical world and the world beyond the physical things. So it is a midway between religion and science. So scope of philosophy. In this is very important for you to understand that if you are talking about the scope of the philosophy, a few things can be written in from the nature. And what a philosopher actually study, or what does a philosopher actually study, what is subject matter or the areas of study of this subject. So this is scope of philosophy. In scope, you can also write some of the merits and demerits of this subject, because if you are saying that philosophy, this is a demerit of philosophy, that philosophy is unable to answer these things. So this is basically a demerit, but it is defining the scope of philosophy. And if you are saying philosophy can study these things, basically you are explaining the merits of philosophy, that philosophy can study, can answer those things which no other subject can answer. And yet you are talking about merit and you are talking about scope. So guidance of man and the science. Now you know that what kind of areas philosophy tries to guide humans about. Gives answer to why instead of what. So why I am saying this? What is an easier thing? Why is a reality beyond that? So this is philosophy tries to explain things how they are. This is what, why they are. This now this is philosophy. That philosophy is explaining things even from the level where no other subject is explaining the things. So even fundamental reality, even basic reality, this is the subject of philosophy. Then philosophy explains basic concepts of all fields. For example, philosophy tries to explore what is matter, what is life, what is mind. So psychology, biology, physics, these have close linkages with philosophy. This is trying to explain various concepts of other academic disciplines. So intellectual foundation of religion, this is very important, that if you want to understand religion, you need to understand philosophy as well. uh, this is Berkeley. I think Berkeley said that if you are limited, if your knowledge of philosophy is limited, uh, it will create hatred for religion in you. But if your knowledge of philosophy is sound, it will make you more religious. So when you are a good philosopher, the distance between you and religion is reduced. So this is true that philosophy provides intellectual foundations for religion. Then health and happiness of mind, obviously this is scope of philosophy, because if you are engaged in some sort of physical in some sort of philosophical activity, in philosophical exploration, in study of the things around you, it will give a level of satisfaction, increase your satisfaction of your mind. And that is why Socrates, Aristotle, Plato believed that biggest virtue is is intellectual excellence. So they believe that this is biggest virtue for a person, because there is no other pursuit, there is no activity, or there is no occupation in the material world that is so rewarding, that is so benefiting as compared to philosophy. So it is only the power of philosophy that provides you happiness that no other material things can provide. Then philosophy combats superstitions and false beliefs. This is very important. Basically, the superstitions and false beliefs were enemies of humans. We humans actually reached this level of civilization on the wings of philosophy. Philosophy actually helped us reach to this current level of development. So if philosophy would not have busted some of the myths, science, religion, governance would not have evolved. This is very important. False beliefs, gift of rational and logical thinking. That again is because if you are a philosopher, so rational and logical thinking are prerequisites for philosophy and are products of philosophy. If you are a philosopher, you would automatically start to see things rationally. You would automatically start to think logically. So these are prerequisites as well as byproducts of philosophy. So then you can make informed choices in your life. So sound planning in your life is also a product of philosophy. If you are a philosopher, your perspective about things, about life, about religion, about your own powers, about your own likes and dislikes and interests would change. So as this discipline has power of changing someone's perspective, so you would be able to make better decisions in your life. Then our next topic of study would be relationship of philosophy with science and with religion. Differences and similarities of philosophy with science and religion. Thank you very much.